Okay, so I am Teodora Todorova, and I have lived in the United States about going on 19 years now, and I have been born and raised in Sofia, Bulgaria.
So Teddy was my au pair when I was younger. So here are some pictures of her with my parents and me when I was younger.
No, not necessarily. I think it was at that time, at least for me, it was an opportunity to come and take a year off and take a break and experience the culture. Um, I don't think that I would not have gone somewhere else if that opportunity was present. Um, but the decisive factor, whether to stay out of my country, regardless of what country I was in, was because the economy in my country was really messed up at that time.
What Teddy is referring to here is a time before the 90s where Bulgaria was a part of an economic band with the Soviet Union. So when the Soviet Union disbanded, Bulgaria was left in a large economic turmoil.
So I was 23. I had started thinking about possibly starting a family. I was looking forward to that chapter of my life, and I did not want to raise a family or start a family in a country that did not give any future to my kids. So I think it was the economy and the situation that was decisive factor. Have I been somewhere else out of the United States? If the economy was stable, I would probably would have made the same choice. Oh, absolutely. All of them are bilingual. They speak to their grandparents only in Bulgarian. I try to take them once a year because Bulgaria is half of their makeup. Um, no, not necessarily, especially not in the South. I imagine that that would might have been a problem in other parts of the country, but in the South, I think that people were very welcoming. I don't think I had to abandon anything. If it did happen, if something took a back place, it was not because somebody forced me to. It was just maybe part of it. It was even me trying to integrate better because when you keep on latching to your own culture, then your integration process is not as successful, and a lot of people end up not being happy where they are because they long to go back. They long to eat their food, drink their drinks, listen to their music, speak their language. So they end up so homesick. They can't integrate. They end up so homesick that some of them, I have friends in 5 or 10 years, they end up going back. So I think for me it was important that I integrate. So I did not feel any pressure to abandon any of the things that I have done. Um, Actually, the other way around. When I went back home to visit, I had to alter some of my story of, hey, what is the American dream? So I remember that I was not necessarily proud that I had to bus tables and wash dishes in order to be where I am because I had a life that was very different in Bulgaria. So if anything, it was the other way around. No, not necessarily. Maybe I have been here for that long. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but to say I think of it daily will be exaggeration. Um, I think I made a choice when I stay here that this is going to be my country. When I got sworn and I got my citizenship, they refer to Bulgaria as my former country. Um, Fortunately, at that time, I was not. 6 months after I gained citizenship, um, all the Bulgarians that gained citizenship were asked to abandon their Bulgarian citizenship. That was not the case with me, but they refer to my country, my birth country, as my former country, and America as my own. And you know that a U.S. Special Forces Army officer spouse, which makes me serve and talk and do American flag, American culture majority of the times. So I think about Bulgaria around the holidays, when I speak to my parents, when I meet my friends, like everybody else, but it's not a daily thing, that's for sure. I would say yes. I was hoping to give a better future for my kids. I was heartbroken that I had to leave my own country and leave my parents, and I didn't want to raise kids that would grow to be 20 and leave me for better opportunities. So I feel like I am in a place where I can raise my kids and they can have a chance for a good education. I have a chance for a decent life and job, and I think that this is everything that I had hoped for. I'm not disappointed at all. I can say that exceeded my expectations. I feel like this was exactly what I was hoping for. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it is. I don't think that there is easy anywhere. So I like where I am. I have no regrets.
I'm Hedy Fraunhofer. I work at Georgia College. I'm professor of German and French at Georgia College in Milledgeville, Georgia.
Right.
I'm originally from Germany, and I did a graduate degree in Germany. And at the time when I was done, there was unemployment for teachers. So I thought there was no rush for me to finish the practical part of my education, and so I went to the States to possibly pursue a doctorate, which I did. And so my doctorate is from the University of Oregon. Well, the American dream, let's first of all talk about what we mean by that. If you mean by the American dream being basically an economic, financial dream, that you can become rich, you can be well off financially through your own hard work. I think there's a variety of ways of doing that, but of course studies show that economic well-being is for many people linked to having an education. I think the American dream is the Jeffersonian ideal of democracy has to do with education. So if the American dream is also, basically when we talk about the American dream, it's a dream for the individual. It's an 18th century philosophy, right? Replacing the emphasis on blood before the American and the French revolutions, individual merit and philosophy based on individual merit. But if you would agree that well-being is also defined socially, I think for social well-being as a nation and as a person's contribution to that community, education plays a vital role. And that is one of the reasons, or the main reason, why in other industrialized nations, such as the nations in continental Europe, education is free, not just primary and secondary education, but also university education. There is basically no tuition. Basically, the regulation currently is that so-called illegal immigrants are not eligible to receive a public education. Right?
Yes, and that includes people who don't necessarily have a residence, refugees, and then people who just legally fit under the illegal immigrant kind of legal status.
So I think first of all the term illegal to apply for a person is already discriminatory. There are no illegal people, right? There are people with documentation and people without documentation. I think, so basically the answer to your question is part of that larger debate, right? I think that we desperately need, the US desperately needs substantive immigration discussion. Large chunks, large sectors of the US economy depend on undocumented work. The way this is currently set up is basically a system where your economy, your economic well-being depends on people that cannot speak for themselves when they're being exploited by their employers. It's basically another sort of slavery. And these are also, this is also the type of work that is not necessarily attractive to citizens, or if you wanted citizens, people with documentation, to work these jobs, you'd have to pay better wages, you'd have to provide better labor conditions. So this is a system that is exploitative, that lets the US economy reap all the benefits while exploiting a large population, really. So the fact that there are people here that there's young people here that have grown up here, that were brought as children, that are acculturated here, so this is their primary culture. They've grown up in, they contribute to the US economy, and so the question then becomes, should they also have some sort of access and rights when it comes to education? And my answer to that would be yes. Obviously, I come from an education system in Germany where anybody can come if they meet the entry requirements in academic terms, and there is no tuition, they can come and study at a German university, right, without tuition. So yes, by all means, I think that people that meet the academic requirements should be able to get an education where they choose. I mean, that's basically how I came. I came from Germany. I qualified for the graduate program, and that's how I stayed. I think we need to rethink these issues, because ultimately immigration and diversity are things that enrich a country. One of the reasons why the US has been doing so well culturally and economically is that it has such a diverse gene pool and such diverse cultures and ideas coming together. So I know there is a discourse out there that frames immigration as a major threat, security threat, cultural threat, and you know, I don't want to minimize that there are certain things that need to be addressed, and I mean, security is important, but ultimately immigration and diversity is an enrichment. I think it's very generous on the part of the people providing that education. My question would be, how usable is it for people when, you know, to receive jobs they need degrees, they need, again, documentation. It's obviously not a perfect system. I mean, obviously it would be preferable for people to have legal access to education that will provide them documentation of their education. But, you know, in an imperfect world, for now, I have to say I admire people who take an extra step and provide some sort of temporary solution. Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think what's going on right now politically is really the struggle for the soul of America. Right? You have America has long, for centuries, constituted this ideal of, you know, let people who aspire to a better world, a better life, come, and that's the American dream, you know, make a life for themselves. Let people who are persecuted, who flee violence, come to safer shores. I mean, this is not a new phenomenon. I mean, when the Irish were coming in the 19th century, they met with a lot of negative rhetoric also. It's always the latest immigration group that gets shunned and receives a lot of hatred. And there's always racial connotations to it. And the current situation is no exception to that. Of course, as you realize, the current situation is extremely verbally violent, and with troops being sent to the southern border and tear gas being sprayed, we're also going beyond verbal violence. I think that part of the discussion, that hatred and fear basically and violence is really the opposite of what I have always considered the idea of America. And I find that extremely sad. After 9/11, I was actually, that was the first time I really received some negative feedback for being even a white European immigrant, right? But I'm sure that people with darker skin color, different national origin, get a much worse deal than I am getting. So, I mean, we have a situation where the president's wife is an immigrant. Her parents just got citizenship without any problem, but people from the south of the United States, from Central or South America, are labeled with all kinds of epithets: rapists, criminals, and that is very unfortunate. So yes, I'm sure I have not seen the worst of it myself. Yeah.